Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. I thought I knew everything about him. 10 years of marriage, laughter, little traditions. Our favorite cafe on Sunday mornings, the way he always left love notes in my lunch. I thought he was predictable in the best way, but I was wrong. It started with something small. A forgotten phone under our bed, buzzing in the middle of the night. That was unusual. My husband, David, wasn't careless. He had his habits, his routines. His personal phone was always in the charger by his nightstand. So why was there a second one? Curiosity, or maybe unease, made me pick it up. The screen lit up with a message from an unknown number. Status update? My stomach twisted. I shouldn't have looked further. But something in me knew this was important. I unlocked the phone. No passcode. Strange. There were messages, but not to me. Not to friends. Just one contact, saved under shadow. I clicked. The boss suspects nothing. Mission almost complete. The room felt smaller. My breathing turned shallow. My husband had a second phone, and whoever he was talking to wasn't asking about dinner plans. I should have woken him up right then. Should have shaken him and demanded answers. But I didn't. Instead, I placed the phone back where I found it and lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, wondering, who was this man sleeping next to me? And what had I just uncovered? I barely slept that night. My mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. Who was Shadow? What mission was my husband talking about? And most terrifying of all, what if I was in danger? David slept soundly beside me, unaware that his secret was no longer a secret. I turned on my side, watching his chest rise and fall. He looked so normal, so ordinary. This was the same man who held my hand during thunderstorms, who danced with me in the kitchen when our favorite song came on. Had he been lying to me this whole time? Morning came, and I acted normal. I had to. If he was keeping secrets from me, I needed to play it smart. I made coffee like always, kissed his cheek, and smiled through my panic. "Sleep okay?" he asked, taking a sip from his mug. I hesitated. "Yeah. You?" He nodded, his expression unreadable. I wanted to scream at him, to throw his phone on the table and demand the truth. But I needed more. Proof. A plan. So I waited. That night, when he went to shower, I took his second phone again. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the messages. Most were vague, but some stood out. The boss is getting suspicious. Meet at the usual place. We need to move faster. My breath caught in my throat. The boss? What kind of boss? Who was he working for? And why had he kept this from me? Footsteps. I shoved the phone back under the bed and forced a smile as David walked in, a towel around his waist. If he noticed anything, he didn't say. But something told me he knew. I couldn't keep quiet anymore. That night, as we lay in bed, my mind screamed for answers. The silence between us felt heavier than ever. I turned to him, my voice careful. "David, do you ever feel like we don't tell each other everything?" He looked at me, startled, then gave a small chuckle. "What do you mean?" I swallowed hard. "Secrets." Something flickered in his eyes. A hesitation. A shadow. I had seen that look before, but never directed at me. "I don't keep secrets from you," he said smoothly, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "Liar." I forced a smile. "Good." I leaned closer, resting my head on his chest, but my heart was hammering. I wasn't ready to confront him. Not yet. I needed to know more. The next evening, while David was in the shower, his second phone buzzed. My pulse jumped. I grabbed it. Unknown number. "We have a problem." I froze. A moment later, another message appeared. Unknown number. "He knows." My breath caught. Who knew? David's boss? Someone else? And what did they know? I didn't have time to think. The bathroom door creaked open. I barely managed to shove the phone back in place before David stepped into the room, toweling his hair. He looked at me. "Everything okay?" I forced a nod, my stomach twisting. For the first time in 10 years, I was truly afraid of my husband. The fear ate at me all night. Was I safe? Had someone been watching me? By morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to confront him. I waited until breakfast, when we were sitting at the kitchen table like any normal couple. Only we weren't normal. Not anymore. Whose shadow? I asked, my voice calm. David's spoon paused midair. Slowly, he lowered it. His face didn't change, but I saw it. Something behind his eyes. Where did you hear that name? His tone was controlled. Too controlled. I set my coffee cup down. I saw your phone. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he sighed, rubbing his temples. I was going to tell you, he muttered. I scoffed. When? After it was too late. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw it. The weight. The exhaustion. He wasn't just keeping secrets. He was carrying them. And I wasn't sure I wanted to know the truth. David ran a hand down his face. You have to trust me. I let out a bitter laugh. Trust you? After I just found out you've been lying to me for, what, years? He looked at me, something breaking in his expression. I was never supposed to fall in love with you. His voice was almost a whisper. That wasn't part of the plan. A chill ran through me. What plan? I breathed. He hesitated. Then, finally, he said it. I'm not who you think I am. I stared at him, waiting. I've been undercover for the past 10 years, he said. I was assigned to infiltrate an organization, a very powerful one. My job was to get close to the boss and bring him down. I shook my head. And me? What was I? Part of the cover? No, he reached for my hand. You were the one real thing in all of this, but I didn't know if I could believe him. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My husband wasn't just keeping a secret. He had been living a double life. For 10 years. How do I even know if that's true? I whispered. David leaned forward. Because if I was lying, I wouldn't be telling you this now. I wanted to argue, to throw his words back at him. But deep down, I knew. I knew. Still, it didn't change the fact that my life, the life I thought we built together, was a lie. Or was it? I pushed my chair back and stood up. I need time. He didn't stop me as I walked away. Because we both knew, there was no coming back from this. I spent the next few days in a haze, unsure of what to do or who to trust. David was still around, but he kept his distance. He didn't press me to talk, didn't ask about my day. We were two strangers living under the same roof. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in the middle of a tangled web, each thread, a lie. A part of the truth I was afraid to untangle. The house felt suffocating. I found myself pacing, my mind constantly racing. Could I live with the knowledge that everything about our life, our first date, our wedding, even the way we argued, was all part of his mission? I glanced at the photos on the walls. Happy memories. Smiling faces. But now I wondered, were those smiles real? David had told me the truth about his mission, but it didn't feel like enough. I needed to know everything. Every detail. What was he involved in? Who were these people? That afternoon, I couldn't wait any longer. I went through his things. His dresser drawers, the back of his closet, the drawer by the front door where he kept his papers. Everything was neat, orderly, until I found a small folder tucked away at the very back. It was thick, almost like a binder. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were photos, names, dates. These weren't just random notes. These were detailed reports, everything from surveillance footage to coded messages. I almost dropped the folder when I saw a photo of David with a man I didn't recognize. They were standing side by side, smiling like old friends. But there was something off, something in the way David was looking at the man. It wasn't the look of someone working undercover. It was the look of someone with something to hide. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The folder in my hands was heavy with the truth. The more I looked through it, the more the pieces fell into place. Pieces I never wanted to see. David had been in deep with some of the most dangerous people in the world. His boss wasn't just any crime lord. He was an international drug kingpin, one whose name was feared across the globe. The photo I'd found earlier was of David and the boss, standing together in what looked like some kind of private meeting. A handshake. Their eyes locked with an intensity that made me feel nauseous. I stared at the photo for what felt like hours. My husband, was involved with people who killed, who trafficked, who destroyed lives for money. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't believe it. But there was no denying what was right in front of me. I thought I knew the man I married. The man who held me through sleepless nights, who kissed me goodbye every morning with a promise to come back safe. But the man in these photos wasn't the man I'd known. I realized something in that moment. I didn't know David at all. I wasn't sure when it happened. The moment I stopped seeing him as the man I loved and started seeing him as a stranger. Maybe it was the day he admitted the truth. Or maybe it was when I saw the photo of him with his boss. Either way, something inside me broke. When David came home that night, he found me sitting on the couch, the folder open in front of me. He froze when he saw the pictures. "I didn't want you to find that," he said softly. "You should have told me," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "You should have trusted me." He knelt in front of me, his eyes pleading. I wanted to, but I couldn't. It was too dangerous. For both of us. My heart twisted. How could I trust you now? How do I know you're not lying about everything? How do I know you're not involved in things I can't even begin to understand? David didn't answer right away. He just sat there, his face pale. "I never wanted this for you. I never wanted you to be part of this life." His words should have been comforting, but they weren't. They were hollow. I stood up. "I don't know who you are anymore." And I left. I walked out of the house, down the street, away from the life I thought I knew. That was the moment I lost him. It was a week before David reached out again. A message. "I love you. Please come back. Let's start over. I'll explain everything." But how could I go back? How could I look him in the eyes again, knowing the truth about who he really was? I spent days torn, not knowing what to do. Every time I thought about him, I felt that deep ache in my chest. I missed him. I missed us. The way we used to laugh. The way he held me in his arms like nothing could ever hurt us. But the man I loved wasn't the man he'd turned out to be. He was a spy. A man who lived in the shadows, deceiving everyone around him. And now I couldn't trust him. I couldn't even trust myself to know what was real anymore. I was standing at a crossroads. If I chose to go back, I would be choosing to live a life of secrets. To live in the unknown, always looking over my shoulder. If I walked away, I was giving up the love of my life. The only man I'd ever truly loved. I didn't know what to do. It was 3 days after David's message that I received an unexpected visitor. I had spent the last few nights trying to move forward, to pretend that everything was normal. But nothing was. The knock at the door made my heart skip a beat. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I found a man standing on my doorstep, a man I didn't recognize, but he looked familiar in a way I couldn't quite place. "I need to speak with you," he said, his voice calm but urgent. I hesitated, but something in his eyes made me step aside. He paused, glancing over his shoulder. "I'm a friend of David's." That was all he needed to say for the flood of emotions to hit me again. My breath caught in my throat, and I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at him. "I don't want anything from you," he continued, his tone softer now. "I need to warn you. He's in over his head. And if you don't make a decision soon, it might be too late." I stepped back, letting him inside. "What are you talking about?" I whispered. The man didn't waste any time. "David's been undercover for longer than he's told you. And he's not just playing a part anymore. He's been tangled in the very web he was trying to take down." I felt my stomach drop. "He's in danger, and so are you," the man added. I took a shaky step back. "What are you saying?" "He's gone rogue. And if you don't leave, there might not be a way out." My heart raced. I had already been living with the knowledge that my husband had lied to me for years, but now I was hearing something worse. David wasn't just lying. He was playing a dangerous game that had spiraled out of control. My mind was in turmoil. How could I walk away from him now? How could I live with myself knowing that I might be abandoning him in his darkest hour? But then I remembered the phone calls, the coded messages, the life he'd been living, one I had never been a part of. I wanted to believe him when he said he was trying to protect me. But how could I? I walked to the window, staring out at the street below. The world felt foreign. How had I gotten here? How had my love for David turned into a labyrinth of secrets and lies? I thought back to all the little things. The way he would leave for hours without explanation, his sudden mood changes, the subtle things I had brushed off for so long. They all made sense now. But this new revelation, that David was in deeper than I had ever imagined, was too much. I looked at the man in my living room. What do you want me to do? His eyes softened. You need to decide. Stay with him, and you'll be putting your life in danger. Or walk away and live. It's your choice. But was it? The man left soon after he spoke, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the fear of what might be lurking just around the corner. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw David's face, torn between the man I loved and the man he had become. I knew I couldn't make this decision lightly. If I stayed, I would be forever entangled in his world. I would be an accomplice, even if I didn't want to be. If I left, I would be walking away from the love of my life. The tears came then. Silent, slow tears. I cried for the man who had stolen my heart and for the stranger he had become. I thought back to our wedding day, how we promised to never keep secrets from each other, how we vowed to always be open, to always be honest. How had it all gone so wrong? As the night stretched on, the truth settled heavily in my chest. David had been living a life I had no part in, and he had been keeping it from me for a reason I wasn't sure I could forgive. The next morning, I decided to visit the place he had first mentioned, the usual place in one of the text messages I'd found. It was the only way to know what was really going on. The usual place turned out to be a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of the city. I parked a block away, my heart pounding as I approached it. The moment I stepped inside, a sense of dread washed over me. The air was thick, heavy with dust. There was no one inside, just rows of empty crates and the echo of my footsteps. Then I heard a voice. Looking for something? I spun around, my breath catching. It was David. He stood in the doorway, looking disheveled, worn out. His eyes were dark, haunted. David, I whispered, feeling the tension between us. I didn't want you to come here, he said, stepping closer. It's not safe. You've been lying to me, I said, my voice breaking. What is all of this? What's really going on? David hesitated, then sighed, his face softening. You need to know everything. And so he told me. Everything. He had been undercover for years, infiltrating one of the most dangerous drug cartels in the world. But it wasn't just about the cartel anymore. Somewhere along the way, David had gotten too close to the boss, too close to the life he had sworn to destroy. He wasn't just trying to take them down. He had become one of them. I felt the ground beneath me shift. Was the man I loved gone forever? I stood there in the dark warehouse, the weight of David's words crashing over me like a tidal wave. My hands trembled, and I couldn't catch my breath. You became one of them? I whispered. David looked down, his voice quieter. I didn't want to. I fought it. But I was too deep, too far gone to get out without bringing down everyone with me. My heart ached as I tried to process what he was saying. The man I had spent a decade with, the man I had trusted with my heart, was no longer the person I thought he was. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, tears stinging my eyes. Why didn't you let me in? His expression hardened. I couldn't. If you knew, you would have been a target. You don't understand the kind of people I've been dealing with. They don't just hurt you. They take everything away. But you lied to me, I said, my voice breaking. You built a life with me on lies. He stepped forward, reaching out for me, but I backed away. I was trying to protect you, he said softly, his voice pleading. I never wanted you to get involved in this. I thought if I could keep you safe, keep you out of it, maybe I could still do some good. Maybe I could fix things before they got out of hand. I shook my head. But you've been living a double life. I don't even know who you are anymore, David. I turned away from him, the anger and betrayal overwhelming my senses. I needed space. I needed air. You don't understand, he continued, desperation creeping into his voice. I thought I could leave when it was over. I thought I could walk away and never look back. But it's too late. I've already crossed a line. Then why didn't you come clean to me? I demanded, my voice trembling. You think I couldn't have handled the truth? You think I couldn't have been there for you? David's face contorted with pain. I wanted to, but you deserve better. You deserve a life I couldn't give you. A life without all this danger. I'm a different person now. I can't go back. The realization hit me harder than I expected. David wasn't the man I had married anymore. He wasn't the man I had fallen in love with. The love we shared had been real, but it had been tainted, manipulated by secrets I wasn't ready to understand. I don't know what to believe anymore, I said, my voice shaking. David didn't answer. His silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. I didn't stay long in the warehouse. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, and the suffocating silence made it hard to breathe. I left without another word, unsure where I was even going. I walked aimlessly, every step heavier than the last. I had to face the truth. David had chosen this life over me, and no matter how hard I tried to make sense of it, there was no going back. I had trusted him with my heart, my future, my world. And he had betrayed that trust in the most unimaginable way. I stopped in front of the park, staring at the swings where we had spent so many afternoons together. I remembered when we'd first met, how I had seen the good in him before he even knew it himself. I wanted to believe that the man I had married was still inside of him, but everything had changed. I sat on the bench, burying my face in my hands. I had so many questions, so many doubts. And the one question that lingered the most, did he ever really love me? The sound of footsteps interrupted my thoughts. I looked up, expecting to see David, but it wasn't him. It was the man who had visited me earlier, the one who had warned me about David. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice low and urgent. I stood up, wiping my tears away. "I don't know who to trust anymore." "You have to leave," he insisted. "David's already too far gone. He's tangled in something that will destroy him and anyone close to him. You can't save him, but you can save yourself." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice raw. "Because you deserve the truth. Because I don't want to see you get hurt." His words were like a slap across the face, but they also carried a weight I couldn't ignore. I didn't know who to believe anymore, David or this stranger. The man who had been so kind, so persistent in urging me to walk away. My heart was torn between the two. But then I heard it, the sound of car engines in the distance. Low, rumbling. My blood ran cold. The man's expression darkened. "They're coming." I didn't ask who. I just ran. I didn't think. I didn't stop to process. I just ran. I could hear the man calling behind me, but I was already too far ahead. My feet pounded the pavement as I weaved through the city streets, my mind a mess of emotions. I didn't know who to trust anymore. The world I thought I knew was falling apart, and I was in the middle of it all. My heart ached for David, but I couldn't let myself be dragged into his world of lies and danger. I didn't know where I was going, just away from the chaos, away from everything that had hurt me. When I finally stopped, gasping for breath, I found myself in front of a small, quiet diner. It was a place I used to go to when I needed to think. I stepped inside, my eyes scanning the empty booths. The weight of everything I just learned settled on my shoulders. I sat down at a booth in the back, staring out the window. What now? I sat in the diner for what felt like hours, lost in my own thoughts. The hum of the coffee machine and the clinking of dishes did little to drown out the storm raging in my mind. I kept asking myself, what now? How could I just keep going on like everything was normal? My world had been turned upside down. Nothing made sense anymore. I hadn't seen David since our last conversation at the warehouse. And even though every part of me screamed to go back, to find some kind of resolution, my gut told me it was too late. Too much had been revealed, and there was no going back. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. I looked down at the screen. It was a message from David. "Please, let me explain. I love you. I'll fix this. Just trust me one more time." I stared at the words, my heart torn. He was still trying to fix everything. But could I trust him? Could I trust anything he said after all the lies? I didn't know. Before I could respond, the door to the diner swung open, and a tall figure stepped inside. My heart skipped a beat. It was David. He was here. I couldn't breathe. My emotions were a whirlwind. How had he found me? Was he still trying to make everything right? Or was there something more he was hiding? I tried to compose myself, to stand up and face him. But the anger, the hurt, everything I felt for him seemed to be rising to the surface. He walked toward my booth, his eyes searching mine with desperation. "Please, don't leave like this," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "I don't know if I can trust you anymore. I whispered, my voice barely audible. David's eyes flickered with pain, and he took a step back. I understand, but I'm asking for one more chance to explain. You have to hear me out. I didn't know what to do. Every part of me wanted to scream at him, to tell him how badly he had hurt me. But another part of me, the part that still loved him, was pulling me toward him. Please, he added, his voice cracking. I'm not who you think I am. I took a deep breath, my mind whirling. Could I trust him again? Could I believe in the man I had once loved? Or had he already destroyed that chance? David slid into the booth across from me, his eyes pleading, but there was also something guarded behind them, something I couldn't quite read. I never wanted to drag you into this world, he began, his voice low, but I was too far in, and the deeper I went, the harder it became to pull out. I thought I could protect you. I thought I could keep you safe from it all. I didn't speak. I just listened, my heart a mess of conflicting emotions. Everything I told you, he continued, it was for your own good. I couldn't let you see what I was really doing. It was too dangerous. But I never stopped loving you. But you lied, I said, finally finding my voice. You lied about everything. You let me believe in a life that wasn't real. How could you do that to me, David? His face crumpled with regret. I never wanted to hurt you. I just didn't know how to tell you the truth. You would have never understood the danger, the people I was involved with, the way it had gotten out of control. I trusted you, I said, my voice trembling. I gave you my trust, and you destroyed it. I know, he whispered, and I hate myself for it. For a moment, we just sat there in silence. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, with all the things we hadn't said before. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw the vulnerability in his eyes. The man I had loved was still there, buried beneath the lies, beneath the danger. But could I forgive him? Could I trust him again? I'm sorry, he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm so sorry for everything. If you leave me, I'll understand. But if you stay, I promise I'll do whatever it takes to fix this, to make things right. I felt the weight of his words settle in my chest. But the truth was, I didn't know if I could ever feel the same again. The hours ticked by as David and I sat there, our conversation stretching into the night. The diner slowly emptied, and the waitress gave us a knowing look before disappearing into the back. It was just the two of us now, caught in the gravity of everything that had happened. David had told me everything. The things I didn't want to hear, the truth I had been avoiding. He had been working for a covert organization, infiltrating the cartel to take them down from within. But over time, he had become too close to the people he was meant to expose. He had crossed lines he couldn't uncross. I never wanted to pull you into this world, he said again, his voice raw with emotion. But I did. And now it's my mess to clean up. I'll do whatever it takes to fix it, but I need you to trust me. I couldn't find the right words. What was I supposed to say? Could I really forgive him for everything? Could I risk my life, our life, on someone who had kept so many secrets from me? I closed my eyes, trying to center myself. I had to make a decision. David was looking at me with such desperation, his face pale, his shoulders slumped with the weight of regret. He wanted redemption. He wanted forgiveness. But did I want to give him that chance? I opened my eyes, meeting his gaze. The man who had been my everything was now a stranger. But the question lingered. Could I walk away completely? I sat there, staring at David, the silence between us so thick I could barely breathe. I could feel my heart pulling me in two directions, one toward him, the man I had loved for so long, and the other toward freedom, toward a life without lies, without danger. He was waiting for me to respond, his eyes full of raw emotion, full of hope. But inside, I was fighting a battle I wasn't sure I could win. Could I forgive him? Could I forgive the man who had lied, who had betrayed me, even if he had done it to protect me? Everything he had done had been for the job, for a cause that I could never truly understand. And that made me feel small, insignificant, as if I was nothing more than a pawn in a game I had never asked to play. But then again, he had never asked for any of this either. You don't get it, I finally said, my voice low but steady. You don't get what it feels like to be the one left behind, To watch you go day after day, not knowing what you're doing, who you're with, what risks you're taking. I lived with that fear every day. And you didn't even think to tell me the truth. David's face tightened with guilt. I know, and I hate myself for it. But I was protecting you. I was protecting both of us. If I had told you everything from the start, we would have both been in danger. But I deserve to know. I snapped, standing up, my frustration rising. I deserve to be a part of your life, David. I'm not some person you can just leave in the dark while you live this double life. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to drag you into this, he said, his voice desperate. But I need you to believe me. I need you to trust me now. I shook my head, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I loved him, I did. But how could I keep loving someone who had deceived me for so long? I looked down at the table, trying to steady my breath. I don't know if I can, David. The words felt like a betrayal, but they were the truth. I didn't know how to move forward. David's face fell. He looked defeated, broken, as if my words had shattered something inside him. I understand if you need time, he said quietly, but I'm begging you, don't leave me. I can fix this. I can make it right. I stood there, my heart aching with every word, every plea. But deep down, I knew there was no going back. Things had changed forever. I don't know if I can stay, I whispered, my voice trembling. I need time. I need to think about everything. David nodded, a silent acceptance in his eyes. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready. But even as he said those words, I knew that nothing would ever be the same between us again. I left the diner without looking back, my mind consumed by the weight of the decision I had to make. I didn't know how much time had passed since I left David behind. Hours? Days? It all blurred together. I wandered the streets, lost in my thoughts. It felt like the world was spinning faster than I could keep up. How had everything gotten so complicated? David's face haunted me. His words echoed in my mind. I can fix this. I can make it right. But could he? Could he really fix everything? As I walked through the city streets, the reality of my situation began to settle in. No matter what I chose, I would be changed by this. If I stayed, I would always carry the knowledge that David had kept secrets from me, had put me in danger without even asking. If I left, I would have to live with the heartbreak of walking away from the man I had spent 10 years with, the man I had believed I would grow old with. I sat on a bench in a quiet park, my hands shaking as I tried to calm myself. I thought about all the things we had shared, the laughter, the late-night talks, the moments of happiness. I thought about the promises we made, and how they had slowly unraveled, piece by piece, over time. But could I keep living a lie? Could I keep pretending that everything was okay when it clearly wasn't? A part of me still wanted to believe in David, the man I had married, the man I had trusted, but another part of me knew that trusting him again might mean losing myself. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of everything sink in. I didn't know what the right answer was. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I had to make a decision soon. The next day, I woke up with a feeling of clarity I hadn't had in weeks. The noise in my head had quieted, and for the first time, I was able to see things a little more clearly. I couldn't keep going back and forth. I couldn't keep living in this limbo of uncertainty. I needed to make a decision. I thought about David again, about the love we had once shared. I thought about the man he was, and the man he had become. I thought about the lies, the secrets, and the danger. And in that moment, I realized something. David had tried to protect me, but in doing so, he had kept me in the dark. And maybe, just maybe, the truth was that I needed to protect myself now. I couldn't keep living in a world built on secrets. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when I knew it wasn't. The decision was clear now. I had to walk away. The decision had been made, and yet, my heart felt heavy, as if it had been split in two. I knew leaving David was the right thing to do. The man I had loved was buried under too many layers of deception, too many secrets. But even knowing that, walking away was harder than I had ever imagined. I found myself at our apartment, standing in front of the door that had been our shared space for so many years. It felt wrong, like I was about to turn my back on a lifetime, but I couldn't keep living a lie. I let myself in, the familiar scent of our home hitting me with a wave of memories. Our laughter, the quiet nights spent curled up on the couch, the mundane, everyday moments that I had taken for granted. David was sitting in the living room, waiting for me. His eyes met mine the moment I walked in, and the look on his face was enough to make my heart break all over again. He stood up slowly, as if waiting for the world to come crashing down. "I thought you'd be back," he said quietly, his voice fragile, as though each word was a plea. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I need to talk to you, David." His face immediately clouded with worry. "You've made up your mind, haven't you?" I nodded, feeling the tears well up in my eyes. "I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay. You lied to me, David. You lied to me for so long, and I don't know who you are anymore." He flinched as if my words had physically struck him. He reached out, as if trying to hold on to something he was losing. "Please, just give me a chance to explain. I'll do anything. I don't want to lose you." But it was too late. "I'm not leaving because I want to," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I'm leaving because I have to. Because I can't live in the dark anymore. I can't keep being afraid of what might happen next." David stared at me, his face a mix of pain and disbelief. "So, this is it? After everything we've been through, you're just going to walk away?" I felt my heart break all over again. "I'm not walking away from us. I'm walking away from the lies, from the danger, from everything you kept hidden from me." David didn't speak for a long time. He just stood there, as if processing the words I had said. Finally, he closed his eyes, as if resigning himself to the truth. "I never wanted to put you in this position," he said softly, "but I understand why you have to go. You deserve more than this." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words press down on me. "I'm sorry, David, but I have to protect myself now. I can't keep living in the shadow of your secrets." He nodded slowly, his expression distant. "I never wanted to be the one who hurt you. I just wanted to be with you." "I know you did," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But it's too late." I turned away from him, my heart heavy, as I gathered the few things I had left behind. As I reached the door, I looked back one last time. "Goodbye, David," I said, my voice breaking. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. We both knew this was the end. I left the apartment, my heart in turmoil but my mind clear. It wasn't the life I had wanted, but it was the life I needed now. I had to let go of the past and move forward, even if it meant walking away from the person I had once called my everything. The city felt different now. Every street, every corner seemed unfamiliar. The weight of my decision hung heavily on my shoulders, but as I walked, the first rays of dawn broke through the skyline. A new day was beginning, and with it, the promise of something new. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. I had taken control of my life again. I wasn't going to let the mistakes of the past define my future. There was a freedom in that, a strange peace that I hadn't felt in so long. As I walked through the streets, I realized that sometimes the hardest decisions were the ones that set you free. I had given David everything, my heart, my trust, my life, and in return, he had given me nothing but secrets and lies. It wasn't easy to admit that, but it was the truth. I couldn't keep holding on to something that was no longer there. It was time to let go, to move on, to rebuild my life. And as I kept walking, I felt the first spark of hope. There was a world out there, a life that I had yet to explore. It was time for me to find it. Days turned into weeks, and life continued to move forward, as it always did. But I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid of what might come next. The world David had pulled me into, the world I had so desperately wanted to escape, was still there, lurking in the shadows. I wasn't sure if I was free yet. I wasn't sure if I ever would be. But every day, I took one more step toward healing, toward reclaiming the pieces of myself I had lost. I didn't know where my journey would take me, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally in control of my own story. As the days passed, I started to settle into a new routine. I moved into a small apartment, one that felt like a blank canvas, waiting for me to fill it with my own life. But every night, When I closed my eyes, the memories of David haunted me. The sound of his voice, the way his touch had felt, gentle and reassuring, the laughter we shared. But even as those memories surfaced, I reminded myself that I had made the right choice. I couldn't keep living in the past. I couldn't keep letting his lies define me. It wasn't easy. Every time my phone buzzed, a wave of panic would rush over me, wondering if it was him, if he was trying to reach me. But I had made a promise to myself that I wouldn't go back. I needed to heal, to find a way to rebuild my trust in myself. One afternoon, as I walked down the street, I saw a man in a suit standing near the coffee shop I frequented. His face was familiar, but it took me a moment to place him. He was one of David's old colleagues, someone who had always seemed so distant, so detached from the rest of us. Our eyes met, and for a split second, I saw recognition in his gaze. I quickly looked away, my heart racing. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready for any connection to my past to resurface. I kept walking, my steps quickening. I heard him call out my name. Lena. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I turned around slowly, bracing myself for whatever was about to come. I didn't think I'd see you here, he said, his voice calm but tinged with something I couldn't quite place. I forced a smile, trying to steady myself. I could say the same thing. He studied me for a moment, as if weighing something in his mind. "You're doing okay?" he asked, his tone surprisingly soft. "I'm fine," I replied, my voice firm. "I'm moving on." He nodded, but I could see the concern in his eyes. "David's been asking about you. He's not well." The mention of David's name sent a shiver down my spine. I hadn't heard from him since I left. What could this man possibly know? "I don't want to talk about him," I said, cutting him off. "I'm done with that part of my life." He didn't push any further, but there was something in the way he looked at me, like he was trying to gauge my resolve. "Just be careful," he said quietly. "Some things don't go away just because you want them to." I didn't know what to say to that. Instead, I gave him a curt nod and turned to walk away, the weight of his words settling in my chest. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't truly free. The past, no matter how hard I tried to leave it behind, was always there, waiting for me. Weeks passed, and I did my best to put the past behind me. I focused on work, on building new routines, on finding a sense of peace in the chaos that had once been my life. But there were moments, fleeting but sharp, when the past would come crashing back. I saw a familiar face on the street and wondered where David was. I heard a song on the radio that we had once danced to, and for a brief moment, I felt the ache of his absence. But then I would remind myself, I had chosen this. I had chosen to leave the lies behind, to break free from the world that had almost consumed me. The hardest part was the quiet moments, the ones when I was alone with my thoughts. That's when the guilt would creep in. Was I doing the right thing? Had I made a mistake? I couldn't deny that I still loved him, even after everything. But love wasn't enough to erase the years of secrets and betrayal. One night, I found myself sitting on the couch, scrolling through old photos of us. I hadn't meant to, but the memories hit me all at once. The vacations, the birthdays, the quiet evenings spent talking about the future. What happened to us? How did everything go so wrong? I closed my eyes and let out a shaky breath, wiping away the tears that had formed. I didn't know how to move on. I didn't know how to forgive him, let alone myself. The phone buzzed on the coffee table, and I jumped, startled. I reached for it, my hands trembling as I saw the name on the screen. It was David. My heart stopped. I stared at the phone in my hand, my mind racing. It had been weeks since I had heard from him. Why now? I took a deep breath and opened the message. "I know you don't want to hear from me. I understand that. But I need you to know something. I never wanted to hurt you, Lena. I've been trying to fix things in my own way, but I don't know how to fix the damage I've caused. If you ever decide to give me a chance to explain, I'll be waiting. But I respect your decision. I always have." I read the message over and over again, the words sinking deep into my chest. He was still trying, still reaching out. Part of me wanted to respond, to tell him everything I had been feeling. But another part of me was terrified. Terrified of reopening old wounds, of stepping back into the world I had worked so hard to leave behind. I set the phone down, my hands shaking. What was I supposed to do? The silence in my apartment felt suffocating as I stared at the message David had sent. His words echoed in my mind, the weight of them pulling at my heartstrings. He wanted to explain. He wanted a chance. But was I ready to hear him? To listen to his version of everything that had happened? Part of me was tempted to reach out, to tell him that I still cared, that I hadn't forgotten everything we had. But another part of me, the stronger part, knew that I couldn't go back to the life I had once known. I couldn't let his secrets swallow me whole again. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. It was a bustling, chaotic place, full of people who were moving forward, making their way through life. And I realized that was exactly what I needed to do. Move forward. No more looking back. But the temptation of closure, of understanding his reasons, was hard to ignore. What if he had truly changed? What if there was something I had missed, something that could explain everything? I thought of the quiet moments we had shared, the early morning coffees, the late-night walks, the way he had always been there for me. But those moments were buried beneath a mountain of lies. How could I ever trust him again? I had to make a choice. It was no longer about what I wanted, but what I needed. And deep down, I knew that I needed to let him go, for good. I took a deep breath and hit delete on the message. I wasn't ready to go back. Days passed, and the decision I thought I had made didn't feel as final as I had hoped. The moment I had erased David's message, I had felt a surge of relief. But now, that relief was clouded by doubt. What if I had made a mistake? What if, deep down, I still loved him? It was hard to ignore the quiet ache that lingered in my chest, the emptiness that had started to fill the space where David had once been. I tried to keep myself busy, work, errands, socializing, but no matter what I did, there was a part of me that always felt incomplete. It wasn't just about missing him. It was about the life we could have had, the future we had once dreamed of. But those dreams had shattered in ways I couldn't repair, and I had to come to terms with the fact that some things couldn't be fixed, no matter how hard we tried. I spent an evening with a friend at a cafe, talking about everything but David. But every now and then, the conversation would turn, and I'd find myself thinking about the man I had left behind. My mind would wander to the what-ifs. What if he had told me the truth? What if things had turned out differently? But the what-ifs were dangerous. They kept me tethered to the past, and I couldn't afford to stay there. As my friend talked about her own life, I realized something. She had moved on from her past. She had made mistakes, too, but she had learned to forgive herself, to forgive the people who had hurt her. Maybe it was time for me to do the same. I didn't need to forget everything that had happened. I didn't need to pretend like it hadn't shaped who I was. But I couldn't let it control me anymore. I couldn't let the ghost of David's betrayal haunt me for the rest of my life. It was time to let go, for real this time. Weeks passed, and I felt the gradual shift inside me. The heaviness that had once clung to my every thought began to loosen. I stopped looking over my shoulder, wondering if David would suddenly appear. I stopped questioning whether I had made the right decision. I began to live again, truly live. I joined a new yoga class, something I had always wanted to try but had never made time for. I went on hikes, reconnected with old friends, and started writing again, something I hadn't done in years. The more I embraced this new chapter, the more I realized how much I had been holding myself back. I had been living in the shadow of the past, letting it dictate my future. But now, I was reclaiming my life, piece by piece. I felt stronger, more like myself than I had in years. One evening, as I was enjoying a quiet dinner at home, my phone buzzed. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. It was David. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something inside me told me to answer. Lena. His voice came through the phone, softer than I remembered. I've been thinking about you. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I closed my eyes, the emotions flooding back in waves. I know, David, I said, my voice steady, but I've moved on. I've let go. There was silence on the other end of the line. I understand, he finally said. I just wanted to hear it from you. I hope you're happy. I am, I replied, a sense of peace washing over me. I'm happy now, and I wish you the same. The call ended, and I sat there, the weight of everything slowly lifting off my shoulders. It was over, and I was free. It's strange, the way life moves on when you least expect it. The way you can feel trapped one day and then, without warning, find a way to breathe again. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I know it's mine. I know that I've faced the hardest part of my journey, the letting go, and now, I'm ready to embrace whatever comes next. There's a world out there full of possibilities, full of people I haven't met yet, and adventures I haven't experienced. And for the first time in a long time, I feel excited about the unknown. David is a part of my past now, a chapter I've closed, not with bitterness, but with the understanding that sometimes you have to let go of the people who are no longer meant for you. And that's okay, because I'm moving forward. And nothing feels better than that. Life had a funny way of surprising me. Just when I thought I was getting a handle on things, I found myself facing something new, something unexpected. It was as if the universe had a way of testing me, seeing how far I had come. I had been settling into my new normal, focusing on my work, diving into hobbies I had neglected, and spending time with friends who supported me. I felt like I was finally becoming the person I was always meant to be, the version of me that had been buried beneath the weight of secrets and lies. But then, one afternoon, I received a letter. It was handwritten, the ink smudged slightly as if the writer had rushed. I recognized the handwriting immediately, and my heart skipped a beat. It was from David. I held the letter in my hands, feeling a wave of anxiety wash over me. Was this another apology? Another attempt to pull me back into his world? I had been doing so well without him, without the baggage that came with being part of his life. But I opened the envelope anyway, my curiosity getting the better of me. The letter read, "Lena, I've spent months trying to figure out how to make amends, how to show you that I am not the man I was. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I want to tell you the truth about everything. I've left my life behind. It's not the life I want anymore. I've learned, maybe too late, that the person I was isn't who I want to be. I don't expect anything from you. I just needed you to know that." I sat there for a long time, the letter crumpled in my hands. It was so final. There was a sense of resolution in his words, a sense that he was trying to let go, too. I didn't know what to make of it. I had moved on. I had learned to live without him, without his chaos. So why did his letter still make my heart ache? Was it the finality of it all? The idea that he had truly let go? Or was it the hope that I could forgive him, that I could somehow reconcile the past? But then I thought of how far I had come, how much stronger I was now. I wasn't that woman anymore, the one who had blindly followed David through his world of lies and secrets. I had my own world now, and that world didn't have room for his past. So, I put the letter down, took a deep breath, and made a decision. I wasn't going to respond, not because I didn't care, but because I had to protect what I had built for myself. I had forgiven him, but that didn't mean I had to let him back in. The more I reflected on David's letter, the more I realized that the hardest part wasn't letting go of him. It was letting go of the version of myself that had been entangled with his lies. I had spent so many years living in the shadow of someone else's choices, always reacting to his actions, his mistakes. I had been caught up in his world, and I had forgotten how to live in my own. But now, I was free. I had to keep reminding myself of that. I was free. I had made the choice to walk away. I had made the choice to leave behind the fear, the uncertainty, and the lies. And as I continued my journey, I felt the weight of the past lifting off me. The longer I kept moving forward, the less I looked back. I joined a writing workshop one evening, something I had always dreamed of doing but never had the time for. I sat with a group of strangers, all of us sharing our words, our stories, our thoughts. It felt so freeing, so empowering. I realized then that I wasn't just building a new life. I was rediscovering myself, rediscovering the woman I had been before David, before his secrets had taken over my every waking thought. The more I explored the world around me, the more I felt like I was finally home. And maybe, just maybe, I would find someone to share this new chapter with. But only when I was ready. Only when I was sure that I wouldn't lose myself in someone else's story again. For now, I was enough. I was whole. It's amazing what happens when you stop holding on so tightly. I had spent so many years clinging to memories, to hopes of what could have been. I had been afraid of letting go, afraid of what might happen if I did. But when I finally opened my hands, when I allowed myself to release the past, I discovered something beautiful: freedom. The power of letting go isn't just about moving on from a person or a situation. It's about releasing the hold that those things have on you. It's about taking back control of your own narrative. I had spent years living in the shadows of David's life, adapting to his choices and his lies. But now, I was creating my own path, and it felt like the first time I had truly breathed in years. The world was full of possibilities. And for the first time in so long, I was excited to see where it would take me. One morning, as I walked through the park, I saw someone that caught my attention. It wasn't a face I recognized immediately, but there was something about the way he smiled, a warmth, an ease that felt familiar. I couldn't explain it, but I found myself walking toward him. "Hi," I said, a smile on my face. "Hey," he replied, his voice warm. "You look like you could use some company." I laughed, surprised by how easily the conversation flowed. We sat on a bench together, exchanging stories about our lives, our struggles, and our dreams. He didn't know anything about my past, didn't know who I was, where I had been, and somehow that felt perfect. I didn't need to explain my past to him. I didn't need to justify who I had been. I was just Lena, just a woman meeting someone new. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. As weeks went by, I found myself growing more comfortable in this new chapter of my life. I had started to embrace the idea of connections, of building relationships with people who had no ties to my past, no preconceived notions about who I was. And then there was him, the man I had met in the park, Elliot. We kept seeing each other by chance, almost like the universe was pushing us together. It wasn't anything intense, nothing like what I had experienced with David, but it was easy, simple, and comforting. Elliot didn't try to rush anything. He didn't push me to open up about my past or force me to relive old wounds. He was patient, kind, and most of all, understanding. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could just be me. Not the woman defined by someone else's mistakes. Not the one who had been caught in a web of lies and betrayal. Just me. One afternoon, as we walked through the city together, I found myself opening up in a way I hadn't expected. I've spent so long carrying the weight of the past. I thought it was all I would ever be, someone defined by the choices of others. Elliot stopped walking, turning to face me. "That's not you, Lena. You're not your past. You're the person you choose to be today." His words hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. I had spent so much time worrying about the past, about what had happened, that I had forgotten to live in the present. I had forgotten to live for myself. I smiled at him, grateful for his presence, for his ability to help me see things from a different perspective. "Thank you," I said quietly. He grinned, his eyes sparkling. "Anytime." One evening, as I was working on a new project at my apartment, my phone buzzed. I hesitated before picking it up, the familiar anxiety creeping up again. But this time, it wasn't David. It was a text from my old friend, Sophie, who had been a part of my life before everything had fallen apart. She had been there when I first met David, and I had lost touch with her over the years. "Lena, I know it's been a while, but I've been thinking about you. I hope you're doing well. I'd love to catch up if you're open to it. Let me know." I hadn't realized how much I missed Sophie until I read her message. She was one of the few people who had always been there for me, even when I didn't deserve it. I quickly texted her back, agreeing to meet for coffee the next day. When I walked into the cafe, I spotted her right away, her bright smile and welcoming energy instantly making me feel at ease. "Lena," she called, waving me over. We hugged, and it felt like no time had passed at all. We spent the next few hours catching up, talking about everything from the mundane to the deeply personal. Sophie had her own story to tell, her own struggles, her own moments of growth. And as we talked, I realized just how much I had changed. I had been so focused on my past, on what had gone wrong, that I hadn't taken the time to appreciate the people who had stayed by my side. "I'm proud of you, Lena," Sophie said, her voice soft. "You've come so far." I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest. "I've learned to forgive. Not just him, but myself too." We both sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our words settling in. It wasn't until later that week that I had the conversation with Elliot that I had been avoiding. We had spent so many moments together, talking, laughing, sharing small pieces of our lives. But there was still one thing that lingered between us: my past. One evening, as we sat in a cozy restaurant, he reached across the table and took my hand. "Lena," he began, his voice steady, "I know you've been through a lot. I know you've faced things that most people couldn't even imagine, and I don't want to push you to talk about it, but I also want you to know that if you ever feel ready, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." I looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there. It wasn't a plea for my past, for my secrets. It was an invitation to trust again. "I don't talk about it much," I said quietly, "because I don't want it to define me anymore. But you should know, I was married before, and I thought I had the perfect life. But he wasn't who I thought he was. He had secrets, big ones. He was living a double life, and I didn't know until it was too late." Elliot listened intently, never interrupting. When I finished, he gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "I'm sorry you went through that," he said softly, "but I admire your strength, Lena. You're one of the strongest people I know." The weight of my past, the part that had been so heavy for so long, seemed to lift just a little. I didn't need to hide anymore. I didn't need to be ashamed of the scars I carried. Elliot didn't need me to be perfect. He just needed me to be real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was. Months passed, and I continued to build this new life with the people who mattered most: my friends, my family, and even Elliot. But the past still had a way of creeping in. It wasn't about David anymore. It was about the fear I carried. The fear that if I allowed myself to fully trust again, if I allowed myself to love, I might end up making the same mistake. But I couldn't let that fear control me. One day, after a long walk with Elliot, I realized something important. I didn't need to worry about repeating my past. I didn't need to live in the fear of what had happened. I had to let go. Again. Let go of the fear. Let go of the doubt. Let go of the scars. And as I did, I felt freer than I had ever felt before. Trusting again. Wasn't that the hardest thing of all? I had spent so much of my life building walls to protect myself. Walls against David's lies, against the betrayal, against the uncertainty that had once been my reality. But here I was, with Elliot, someone who hadn't asked me to be perfect or to hide my past. He simply asked me to be present, to be real. And for the first time in a long time, I was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could trust again. But trust wasn't something I could simply give away. It was something that had to be earned, slowly, over time. It was about being vulnerable, showing my scars, and allowing someone else to see the parts of me that I had kept hidden for so long. One evening, after another quiet walk through the city, Elliot turned to me, his face serious. "Lena," he said softly, "I know we've been taking this slow, and I respect that, but I want you to know something. I care about you. I care about you more than I've cared about anyone in a long time." I felt a flutter of warmth in my chest. It was the kind of warmth that came from feeling seen, from being understood without needing to explain every detail of my life. "I care about you too," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a long pause as we stood on the street corner, the sounds of the city around us. And then, almost as if he could sense my hesitation, he added, "You don't have to answer me right away, but I want you to know that I'm here. For as long as you want me to be." I took a deep breath, the fear rising up within me, but I knew it was time to make a choice. A choice to let go of the past, to trust in this new connection, and to believe that maybe, just maybe, I was worthy of a love that didn't come with strings attached. "I'm ready," I said, my heart pounding. "I'm ready to trust you." For the first time in what felt like forever, I was allowing myself to feel joy. True joy, without the shadow of my past hanging over me, without the fear that something terrible would happen if I allowed myself to be happy. I spent more time with Elliot, exploring the city, taking spontaneous trips to places I had always wanted to see, and even just sitting in a cafe, enjoying the simple pleasure of his company. And slowly, the darkness of my past began to fade. It wasn't that I had forgotten. It was that I had learned to live with it, to accept that my past had shaped me, but it no longer had to define me. I realized that joy wasn't something I had to earn or prove. It was something I could give myself. One evening, as we sat on a park bench, watching the sunset, I felt a deep sense of peace. The world around me seemed to glow, and for the first time in years, I wasn't rushing through life. I wasn't stuck in the past. I wasn't afraid of the future. I was here, in this moment, with someone who accepted me for exactly who I was. "I never thought I'd get to a place like this," I said quietly. "I never thought I'd be this happy again." Elliot smiled, his eyes full of warmth. "I'm glad you're here," he said simply. And that was enough. One of the hardest lessons I had to learn was how to let go of control. I had spent so many years trying to control every aspect of my life. The way I appeared to others, the way I managed my emotions, even the way I handled relationships. But life wasn't something I could control. Not really. I had spent too long trying to keep everything in its place, trying to make sure nothing would go wrong. But in doing so, I had closed myself off to the unexpected, to the beauty of spontaneity, and to the possibility that things might turn out better than I had planned. One afternoon, as I sat in my apartment reflecting on the changes in my life, I realized that I had been holding myself back. I had been so focused on the fear of what could go wrong that I had failed to see what could go right. I took a deep breath and decided to let go. It wasn't an easy choice, but I knew it was necessary. I had to stop overthinking every decision, stop trying to predict the outcome of every situation. I had to trust that the universe had a plan for me, even if I couldn't see it yet. And as I let go of that control, I felt a sense of freedom wash over me. I didn't have to be in charge of everything. I just had to live and trust that the right things would come to me when the time was right. As time went on, my relationship with Elliot deepened. It wasn't perfect, of course. No relationship ever is. But it was real, grounded in mutual respect, honesty, and a shared desire to build something meaningful. There were moments of doubt, moments when my past tried to creep in and make me question everything. But each time, Elliot was there, patient and understanding. He never pushed me to be more than I was. He never demanded that I open up before I was ready. And slowly, I started to trust him more. Not just with my heart, but with my dreams, my fears, and my vulnerabilities. For the first time in my life, I was in a relationship that didn't feel like a weight I had to carry. It wasn't about fixing each other. It wasn't about trying to make each other perfect. It was about accepting each other, flaws and all. And as we continued to grow together, I realized that love wasn't about perfection. It was about understanding, compassion, and the willingness to grow alongside someone. This was a new kind of love, one that didn't ask for anything but honesty, one that was built on the foundation of mutual respect. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had found something real. There were still moments when the past threatened to pull me back. It happened when I least expected it, during quiet moments, when my mind would wander and I'd catch myself thinking of David, of everything he had put me through. But those moments were fewer and farther between. I had learned to acknowledge them, to feel the emotions, and then let them pass. I had learned to trust the process of healing, of growing, and of moving forward. Every day was a new opportunity to build on what I had created, to keep moving in the direction I wanted to go. It wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. The more I let go of the fear and the need for control, the more I allowed myself to experience life fully. And as I sat in the park one afternoon, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized something important. I was exactly where I needed to be. It felt like everything was finally starting to fall into place. For the first time in a long time, I was no longer haunted by the past. I had faced my fears, let go of the things that held me back, and allowed myself to move forward. But there was still one thing left to do: take control of my future. One day, while sitting on the balcony of my apartment, watching the sunrise, I realized that I had spent so many years letting others dictate my life that I had forgotten to ask myself what I wanted. What was my dream? It wasn't just about love anymore. It wasn't just about healing from the pain David had caused. It was about creating a life I could be proud of, a life I could fully embrace. I had always wanted to start my own business, something I could pour my heart into, something that would allow me to be my own boss, to make decisions without anyone else's interference. It was something I had thought about for years, but I had been too afraid to take the leap. But now, I wasn't afraid. I reached out to some of my old contacts, started doing research, and slowly began to plan the steps I needed to take. I wanted to create something meaningful, something that would not only help me heal but also give back to the community. And as I worked on this new dream, I realized that I had finally found my purpose. As I dove deeper into building my business, I began to rediscover parts of myself that I had forgotten. I had always been creative, full of ideas, but somewhere along the way, I had let those things take a back seat. I had allowed myself to be defined by my past, by the mistakes of others. But now, I was reclaiming my voice. It was scary at times, putting myself out there and sharing my ideas, my vision, with the world. But I knew I had something to offer. I had learned so much in the last few years, not just about business, but about life. I knew what it meant to rebuild from the ground up, to rise from the ashes and start anew. And that was exactly what I was doing. Every decision, every small victory, felt like a step closer to the person I was meant to be. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. Elliot had been there through it all, supporting me, cheering me on, encouraging me to believe in myself. He had become more than just a partner. He had become my greatest ally. And as we sat together one evening, planning for the future, I realized that this was what true love was: support, encouragement, and the freedom to be yourself. It had been 2 years since I had walked away from the life I had known. 2 years since I had taken that first step toward healing, toward rediscovery. And now, as I looked at everything I had accomplished, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. I had rebuilt my life from the ground up. I had found my voice, my purpose, and my happiness. David's shadow no longer loomed over me. His lies, his manipulation, his betrayal, they no longer defined who I was. I had forgiven him, but more importantly, I had forgiven myself. The past no longer had control over me. I had let go of the fear, the anger, and the shame. I had learned to trust again, not just in others, but in myself. And as I sat in my office, preparing for another meeting, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. This was the life I had built. This was my new beginning. And it was just the start. Thank you for listening to my story until now. If you like the video, please support it by subscribing and liking.